I have this one mic that it's picking up the kick drum and snare drums. I have it over the kick drum. The diaphragm is pointing at the side of the snare, and it's like hanging right above the kick drum. And so honestly, I used that mic on the newest Soulive album, and that was the only mic that I used on the drums. Like one microphone.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lydia, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by OWC, Other World Computing, which you can find at OWC.com. Your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can go to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level. And you can start right now with my free Introduction to Mixing course, Mix Master Bundle. This course will show you how to get pro-sounding mixes from your home studio with free and stock plugins in Pro Tools. And the best part is that these mixing techniques will work for you in any DAW, whether you are in Logic, Cubase, Presonus Studio One, Reaper, or anything you can think of. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, or look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Hey Rockstars, it's your host Shawn. Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Alan Evans, a multi-instrumentalist, singer, songwriter, studio engineer, record producer, whose retro style incorporates elements of rock, blues, soul, R&B, funk, jazz, reggae, and the psychedelic. In addition to singing lead and background vocals, Alan often plays guitar, bass, drums, keyboards, and percussion on his solo recordings, as well as for other artists. Alan is also a founding member of the band Soulive, who has toured the world for the past 20 years. In that time, Soulive has toured with the Rolling Stones, the Dave Matthews Band, the Roots, Charles Bradley, John Scofield, Derek Trucks, Chris Robinson, and many more. And these days, Alan spends the majority of his time recording, mixing, and producing bands from around the world at his own Iron Wax Studios in Massachusetts. It turns out that I already knew Alan from decades ago when the band Grover that I was touring with in North Carolina opened for Alan's band Moon Boot Lover back in the 90s. In fact, I remember totally loving Moon Boot Lover back then and thought I had forever lost track of that super cool band that I saw till Alan recently reconnected with me, reaching out through email. Listening to Alan's work at Iron Wax Studios just blew me away checking out this material, and I had to ask myself why I ever left Boston in search of music when the coolest stuff was happening right there where I grew up. So I'm psyched to find out how Alan is making such incredible sounding records at Iron Wax Studios today. Please welcome Alan Evans to Recording Studio Rockstars. Alan, my man, are you ready to rock?
Ooh, like Bon Scott. Let's do
nice, dude. Or at least get funky, you know?
Yeah, I can do that too.
So tell us a little bit more about who you are and kind of give us an introduction in your own words, briefly, to just, where you are in the world and how you got into this stuff.
Oh, cool. Well, I am living in Western Mass, Deerfield, Massachusetts, to be exact.
Dig it.
But I've been here for almost 20 years. But prior to that, I grew up in Buffalo, New York, and lived in Brooklyn for a while, San Diego, Woodstock, New York. That was a big part of my life.
I was in Woodstock too when I was a little kid.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we had a log cabin. Yeah. I grew up in Brooklyn too, and so we used to drive up to Woodstock for the weekends for 5 years of my life or something.
Yeah, exactly. It's beautiful there, small community, and yeah, everyone knows each other, and it's great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've just been just playing music literally my entire life. I think I started. My mom says I started playing drums when I was like 9 months old,
Yeah.
and I started playing guitar when I was about 11, and music has just been a part of my life, my entire life. I mean, it's like it's easier for me to play music than it is to speak, because I guess I was probably, you know what I'm saying, I was probably playing music before I was able to really speak. So
That's true, man.
It's my first language.
And I don't think I mentioned drums in your intro, but I mean, first I think of you as just an incredible drummer.
Oh, thank you, man. Yeah, I mean, I guess, yeah, most people know, or a lot of people know me as, as a drummer, obviously with Soulive and Moon Boot and things like that.
Yeah.
But yeah. So that's the short.
So again, it was such a trip to discover Rockstars. I'll give a little transparency. So Alan reached out to me. I checked out this music, and I was blown away by it. And then we started talking, and then I went and looked through his discography, and down there on your list, sort of near the bottom, it said like you had recorded Moon Boot Lover, because it was chronological. And right. I was like, no way you recorded Moon Boot Lover. And then you're like, that was your band.
Yeah, it was a long time ago, man. That's a life. That's a whole different life.
Who are some of the other cats in that? I seem to remember a really great guitar player too.
Yeah, so that was Peter Prince, who was lead guitar and singer, and we definitely over the year. My brother Neil was in was in an early incarnation of the band, and then the very last incarnation of the band, which I was a part of. And then we both kind of split at the same time. But I mean, man, we did the Spinal Tap thing with bass players. I mean, we probably went through over the years close to 20 bass players.
Wow. What is your your brother is also in Soulive with you, right?
Exactly.
And what is his instrument?
His main,
right? You're like all of me. Them.
Yeah. I mean, mostly keys, and Neil's really known for his left-hand bass. So in Soulive, we're a trio. We're guitar, keys, and drums, and then we often have like guest singers or horns or things like that. But yeah, so that's honestly Neil. The funny thing is, with Neil, I mean, he plays drums. He's an incredible drummer. But I remember early on in the Moon Boot days, honestly, before we used to be called The Groove back in Buffalo, New York. And Neil was about.
You guys picked a good name after that.
Yeah, trust, yeah, definitely.
And plus, not many of us can say in a sentence "back in the Moon Boot days."
Yeah, not exactly. Yeah, these days no one knows what we're talking about. Well, But anyway, so back in the day, Neil must have been about 11 or 12 at the time, and we had this. It was the four of us. We had a bass player, Peter, myself, Neil, and we had this gig in Buffalo, totally sold out. And Pete said, "Oh man, I got to go pick up the bass player from college. He was at the school down the road." So we're hanging out. Place is just filling up. It's nuts. My parents are there. Everybody was. This was a big club too. Pete shows up, and he says, "Yeah, whatever the bass player's name was, I don't remember. He's not here. He's not coming." And we're looking like, Pete's just messing with us, man. So Neil and I walk outside into the parking lot, looking around for the cat. He's not there. He literally quit the band that night. So Neil, that was the first time that Neil, he just took over. He played bass, left-hand bass, keys. And after that, it was over with. I mean, now with that said, Neil always kind of been doing that a little bit at home. He that's just kind of the way he hears things,
more Spinal Tap reference. He's like, yeah, I got two hands.
Exactly. Yeah. And from then on, I was just like, well, we don't need a bass player. And that just kind of set Neil off on his path.
That's a trip, man.
Yeah.
Well, all right, cool. So Moon Boot Lover was sort of the 90s into 2000s or not?
Well, Neil and I split in 96. So,
okay, dig.
Yeah. And then I spent a short time with the Grey Boy All-Stars out in San Diego around 98 98, and then Soulive started in 99.
Okay,
so,
cool, cool. Well, fast forward to now, you have this amazing studio. I mostly know the sound of it just listening on your website. It just sounds like I'm just like, I want to make records that sound like that. So tell us about Iron Wax Studios.
Man, Iron Wax, I've had that in this particular space for, I guess, almost 3 or 4 years now. And for a while, I had a much larger studio in the area years ago. And then interestingly enough, I was so busy, I closed it because I was working on so much music that wasn't mine. Like I did a couple of Soulive albums there, and then we'd be touring, and then people would come into the studio. And I got this feeling like, man, I just got to work on my own music.
Yeah.
So I moved home, built a studio at home, and that was cool for a while. And then my brother and I have a group with Oteil Burbridge, who's
cool.
a bass player.
Yeah, I know. I've seen Oteil down here. He with Colonel Bruce.
And exactly. So now he's with the Dead and Company, and then Kofi, his brother, who plays with Derek and Susan's band. Mm-hmm. So we have a band, and we were going to do some recording. And one day I was sitting around, I was like, yeah, I don't want to do this at home. And went on Craigslist and found like this building and moved in. And like, I'm serious, man. Like the session was probably maybe like a week or week and a half. And I moved everything into this building. I was wiring it up as those cats were like driving up to the spot.
Awesome.
Yeah. But that's just kind of how I do things. Not usually the smartest thing, but just dive in. And so anyway, I've been there ever since, and I really love it, man. It's my kind of vibe. It's one room, like no control room kind of vibe.
That's what I was going to ask you about. I think it was. Oh shoot! I'm looking through my notes here. Maybe it was the Go On Love Live at Color Red Studios was also looked like a one room vibe.
Well, actually, that spot they actually have they have a control room kind of off to the side where they have like a 388 kind of. It's a very small. It's like a closet kind of size room. But my spot is just one room, and honestly, like most of my studios have always been like that, just because it's a lot easier for me to move around.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times I'm just cutting stuff by myself. So hey, if I don't have to walk through a couple of doors and all that, it just saves time. And then on the other side of being, I guess on the other side of the glass, you know, say when I'm recording or producing or whatever, I just love being in the room with people.
Yeah.
As you can feel it. And I've got it dialed. I've been doing it for years, so I've got it down. So it works for me.
A couple of thoughts on that. I remember Roger Mutino, who's been on the show before. He once told me years ago, he was talking about a studio space. I think I was talking about building my own, and he was like, "Yeah, you're gonna do the one room or like a writing room?" And I was like, "A writing room, huh?" And that's where it hit me. Like when you're gonna compose and create in your own studio, then there's a great benefit to not having isolation and not having control rooms, because like you said, you want to be able to reach over and grab the knobs on the gear and then turn around and grab the knob on your amp at the same time.
Exactly.
Whereas, if you're going to do a studio where you want to record other bands and have really hear it the kick drum come out of the speakers and then go move the mic, then you do want all that isolation.
Right. Exactly. I mean, the one benefit that I've noticed is that when bands come in and we're all in this room together, and I've had, like 10-piece bands in there, and after everyone's kind of tracked, and there may be one person who's like laying a solo down or cutting a vocal, and the entire band is usually in the room hanging out. And it's a lot different than having the band on the other side of the glass, checking Facebook or Instagram or just kind of hanging out, having conversations. When everybody's in the room, say when a soloist is laying some down, or the vocalist or whatever, percussion, whatever, everyone is engaged. Everyone's quiet, if need be. But they're quiet, they're engaged, and there's this immediate feedback that happens. And it's just this feeling of community, I guess, or just everyone's a part of the entire process. And like I said, it just works for me and it works for the room. It's not everybody's thing. And of course, I go to other studios where I'm in a control room and then everyone, of course, the grass is greener on the other side always. So you're like, oh man, this is kind of nice. I can just kick back and I can really, but it is what it is.
Well, the first thoughts that come to mind for me are some of the rock recordings that I've done where you're really going for kind of a big produced sound or something, or you need big room mics on drums. I find in those cases, if you're sort of really looking at adding where you've got a click track on a song and you're trying to get things just right, then having that isolation can be great because it's sort of you versus the computer. Whereas when you want people to play together, having people near each other in the same space is just, it's almost like you ignore all these other things that are distractions, and you just focus on the feeling of what you're doing. And
exactly.
Magic comes out,
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you.
So I was just recording my songs in my studio recently with a drummer and a bass player, both of whom I love a lot. And I put myself in the control room because I needed to control some stuff and I wanted to have my vocal mic isolated from the drums. And the drummer and the bass player were out in the other room. And I realized after we did it, as I was listening back to the music and finding things that I liked about it and some of the things that I thought were oversights, that one of the oversights is that because the bass player, for example, because she couldn't see my hand strumming the guitar, she didn't, I just assumed she sort of, when you know the song, you just kind of can assume that everybody else gets it.
Yeah, of course.
But when you're playing in the same room like that, you can see what everybody's physically doing,
Exactly. And that definitely helps with like dynamics and the movement of that particular song. Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, like I said, I've made records. Well, we both have, both ways or all different kinds of ways, different methods. And yeah, there's just something about just people in a room together. I don't know. It's like you said, it's just, it can be magical when it really clicks.
Well, thinking about it, it's like the sound of it all is what we end up with as a recording, but it's all these things that don't have to do with sound that we forget are super, super important. Like just what somebody's seeing somebody else's body movement in the studio while they're playing. So you just talked about like we've recorded all these different ways, and it makes me want to ask you the question, what are some ways that you haven't recorded yet that you're excited to try out next? Anything come to mind?
The next thing that I really want to do is record a orchestra.
Cool.
I mean, honestly, before that, I've for years I've wanted to write something for an orchestra. But then, so I have to work on that still. But yeah, that's one thing I really wanted to do for a very long time is I think like the bigger, I just love going to like the symphony, and it's just so massive. And I obviously love listening to older symphonic recordings, and even newer stuff is great as well. But to be a part of that's like the next thing on my list that I would love to do.
What do you think? Does Boston have a good symphony?
Yeah, no, not too shabby, not too shabby.
And then I'm trying to remember the name of it. What is the? It's not Candlewood, is it? What's the place?
Oh, Tanglewood.
Yeah, is that out near you?
Yeah, that's a little further west, but very close. Yeah, definitely close.
And that's the summer performance location for the Boston Symphony Orchestra.
Exactly. And then, James Taylor is kind of a staple there. Does and then who else? James Taylor, the Boston, the pops, the vibe there. Yeah.
Arthur Fiedler. I remember him.
Yeah, man. I grew up on a lot of those records, man. I still have some.
So when you think about doing an orchestral thing, is there a sort of a pairing of your soul background with what the orchestral composition is in your head, or something just totally sort of classical traditional?
Well, to be honest, it would be more the one thing I've been trying to figure out for years, and I just need to sit down and just do some homework, but it would be more of like a Quincy Jones approach. And especially after watching his documentary, his sense of Quincy Jones's harmony. There's just nothing. I've never heard anybody. There's just something you always know it's Quincy Jones. Mm-hmm. Just always, no matter what style of music. There's just like his harmonies are just incredible, and I've really wanted to sit down and figure that out. So it would be more, I guess maybe coming from a soul thing, but to utilize a orchestra symphony would be just, is literally just a dream of mine. So.
Are you somebody who's schooled in being able to write out music and compose on paper?
No. So that would probably
part of the
be
homework, right?
part of the homework, or I think. Or maybe bringing in, someone to help out, like my brother, perhaps if he's not too busy, or just, finding someone who really can, I could collaborate with on that. It would be a lot of fun. So or just take the time and just learn myself.
Just for some of the rock stars who are listening now who maybe don't know who Quincy Jones is, who are some of the artists that just top of mind for you that he's worked with and stuff they might be familiar with?
Well, Michael Jackson, obviously. I mean, you have Thriller, Off the Wall, and then you have Frank Sinatra. You did Ray Charles. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's kind of hard to even. How do you even
list stuff? Well, I also remember that he was integral in a lot of the sound of 70s television theme songs and stuff like that too.
Oh, are you? Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, like his film score work alone is staggering. And then again, this pop music and jazz. I mean, he's done everything.
And then the documentary, I haven't seen it yet, but is that something that we can just find on Netflix, do you think?
Without a doubt, Lidge, it'll blow your mind.
All right, cool.
Will blow your mind.
Awesome. Yep. All right, there you go, Rockstars. Go check that out. All right, so I like to ask our guests to kick off the podcast with an inspirational quote. You got anything in mind to get us psyched to hit the studio?
Yeah, I think I do. All right, here we go. Knowing is not enough. We must apply. Willing is not enough. We must do.
I like that, man.
Bruce Lee.
That's Bruce Lee. Yeah. I love it. I'm trying to remember if somebody else has done a Bruce Lee quote on the podcast.
They have. Yeah. And I'm trying to remember who. But I know they have. Yeah.
Well, thank you to whoever it was. Thank you. No, it's definitely got a Yoda vibe to it too, doesn't it?
It does, man. It does. I mean, Bruce Lee is just a super deep cat, and that's just one that just resonates with me.
All right, so knowing is not enough. We have to apply. And what was the second half again?
Willing is not enough. We must do.
Okay, awesome. And what does all that mean to you when you think about making records?
Well, okay, so this actually these days it's probably more important than ever. You can sit around and it's great these days. You can sit around at night or during the day and YouTube any technique or learn about any plugin or microphone or whatever. But at some point you have to get off your butt and go for it. I mean, that's really what it comes down to for me. I've never been. I just like to dive in. I guess that's just I'm a full on Aries, so I usually don't really think too much about consequences or whatever, which is it could be a good or bad thing. But
nice.
Yeah, it's just like, and then like the willing is not enough. You must do. Again, it's just like you can sit around and talk about what you want to do or what you're planning on doing. Just do it.
Yeah, like you putting Iron Wax Studios together in a week and tracking the record.
Exactly.
What were some of the things that went into putting the studio together? So you talked about wiring it up. It's all in one room. How do you lay out your studio in that one room?
I mean, it almost did it. It did it by itself in a way. I mean, honestly, it's a small space. It's 500 square feet. It is not big. Cool. I set it up for tracking. I didn't set it up for mixing. In terms of, so if you walked in, said it's not set up with the mixing situation, like in the first third of the length of the long, the horizontal part of the room or what, you know what I'm saying, man? Yeah. I just set it up so it was comfortable for people, and it's actually I've changed it a little bit over the years, make it a little bit more comfortable. But I just walked in, I clapped my hands. I said, this sounds pretty good. There's some, little like flutter echoes and things going on. So, but I had a bunch of panels from my old spot, and I just went for it. Just set everything up and hit record, and just prayed for the best.
It probably helped that you showed up with a bunch of stuff, so you could just start filling it up. Because an empty room feels awfully like an empty room until you start putting things in there, right?
Exactly. And I've been doing this long enough that I can walk into an empty room and I know what it will sound like. Mm-hmm. I can or for the most part. And I lucked out. I mean, it has really high ceilings, which helps. Yeah. And it has a couple of oddly shaped walls in there. Because the cat who was in there before me was building custom motorcycles.
Oh, cool.
So it's on the first floor, and then it's right. I mean, there's one door to get in the entire building, and then another door to get into my spot. But the door, he put this massive door on this angle, so he could just roll motorcycles in and out really easily.
So good for loading.
It was. Oh, are you kidding me? It's the best. Yeah, it's great. It's great.
So what's the? Are we talking about like concrete walls, wood walls, drywall?
There's drywall, which if it works for whatever reason. Then there's like a couple of pillars in the room. So there's some, and then like I said, I put panels on some panels on the wall. Mm-hmm. There's actually. I threw carpet on the floor, which was kind of because the floor was super. It was crushed from like building motorcycles.
Yeah, was it a wooden floor or something else?
Well, it was a wooden floor underneath, and then it was like this linoleum kind of vibe. So the thing is, the floor actually looked pretty cool. Like when I walked into the room. I just knew immediately. I just had this feeling. He had a couple other rooms. The guy who runs the building had a couple other rooms he wanted me to check out. But I walked into this room and it was like immediately, I was like, oh, some stuff's going down in here. It had like this vibe of like the studios from like the 50s, cool. Kind of, like, or like that cat I can't remember his name, who's like over in the UK, who has like this super old school vibe studio. And you like look at the photos and it literally looks like something out of like Memphis in the 50s, it's like,
oh yeah.
Yes.
Toe Rag Studios.
Exactly. It had like that kind of vibe where it's like, it does not look like a studio, but or by today's standards, I guess you would say.
No, I like the look of old school studios so much better than
yeah, man. I love it, man. So that's kind of the vibe. And I'm like, right on this river.
Oh, cool.
And so, yeah, man. And so I had like the whole Muscle Shoals kind of, vibe talking to me in the background. Like, man, there's just, and it's true. There's just something about being close to moving water. There's something about that vibe.
Well, Massachusetts has got a lot of cool mill town vibes to it. There's a lot of mill buildings and old brick.
Exactly. And that's exactly what this is. It's a massive old brick mill building.
That's cool. All right. So you're in the room. It's 500 square feet. So that's bigger than a living room,
Mm-hmm.
And then the ceiling is tall. Is it sort of a flat ceiling, or is it a big vaulted open thing with joists and metal beams exposed and that sort of vibe?
No, just a flat ceiling with like acoustical panel. It's like a drop ceiling. So above that, it's just like these old wood beams.
Oh, cool.
But they drop the ceiling a little bit, and then there's like these just acoustical, panels that you would find in, an office or whatever, what have you.
Okay, and then you go in. I guess I'm trying to like help the Rockstars picture walking into a space
Sure.
and knowing that it's right now. So, you put up some panels on the walls, and then how would you describe the amount of echo or sound of the room when you were like, this is going to work?
Well, the amount of echo that was in the room when I first walked in, it was very short, like super short, and kind of annoying. So I wanted to just get rid. I could hear these echoes just coming off the walls. Again, it's like drywall, so it's not very forgiving in that sense. So I put, like I said, I had tons of old panels that I built for my old studio.
Like 703 or Rockwell panels.
Exactly. So I threw those up, and immediately that just did it. And then
a quick question for you on that. Did you immediately start drilling holes through the wall and hanging panels, or did you have some clever way of saying, I'm just going to put panels in different positions and get a feel for whether that's where they belong?
No, I didn't have time, I guess. So I walked the room. And I just, again, 500 square feet isn't that big. Yeah. So, and there's not a lot of panels on the wall, but I guess to be honest, man, I lucked out. And I really wish I could tell you, I did the math and all this.
We don't care about math. We care about the gut feeling that works out too. Would you describe it as there's more drywall that's exposed than soft panel surfaces in the rim?
Oh, without a doubt.
Cool,
yeah, without a doubt. Yeah.
And then talk about where you position instruments and how you like to have everybody, is there some isolation somehow of different instruments, or are they all just talking to each other's mics? They are talking
to each other's mics in a very pleasant way, I'll say. So I put so if you're looking at an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, let's say, the drums would be in the top right. We're looking down at the studio from the ceiling. Cool. The drums are in the top left-hand corner of that sheet of paper of the studio, kind of angled into the studio to the center. The organ and the whole key world is on the other side of that would be the top right of the sheet of paper. Then the guitars are along between bass amp and guitar amps are along the wall between the drums and we'll say the bottom part of the left-hand sheet of the paper. And then the bottom right would be, it's just kind of like an area where I have a bench. It's kind of like a chill area, but mostly turns into where horns go or percussion. And then the console area is in between on the opposite wall of the guitar amps between the organ
on the right side of the paper.
Exactly.
Cool. All right. Dig it.
And just like a big open space in the middle. So,
and then when you're recording, if you're over on the drum kit playing, How do like, what's a clever way for you to manage the recording part in the studio, or do you always just have somebody to help you with that?
No, I'm if I'm in there solo, it's literally solo. So it depends on the vibe. Most times I don't even use a click track, so that kind of helps. I'll just go in. Well, and the other thing about the studio, it's like everything is mic'd up and ready to go. It's very rare that I change anything, to be honest.
Cool.
Yeah, so it's really easy. Like I'll every once in a while, maybe I'll try a different mic or try something else, but I usually go in by myself and get levels and then I'm just off and recording. So for example, if I'm any day I go in there myself. Actually, the other day I went in there and I went on Instagram Live while I was recording like a tune. So unfortunately, everyone missed the drums because I recorded the drums. I was like, oh, I should go live with this guy. I've been meaning to do it for a while. And I'll tell you why after I explain this. But anyway, I recorded the drums. So, oh, cool. This sounds good. No click track. Came over to the console, hit play, had it, going through the speakers. I was like, all right, yeah, pick up the bass, came up with something for that. And everything's just coming through the speakers, record bass. So, okay, that sounds cool. Then again, everything coming through the speakers, pick up the guitar, play, to that, and then went over to the organ. And the whole entire time, things are coming through the speakers.
Just filling up this room.
Exactly. So, and when you solo, like say the guitar, you hear a very little bit of what is coming, what the guitar mic is picking up from the monitors. But to me, I mean, I've done it the other way with headphones when I'm just recording by myself, and it always sounds very sterile because there's no bleed. So I want some of the room. I want all the mics to be picking up something. Well, obviously the drum mics aren't picking up anything because I started there, but like a little bit of the organ is picking up something. The bass. Yeah, I have a bass amp and a DI going. So, cool. And it just kind of helps fill it out.
Yeah, it's like it glues it together. It glues the sound more and more together.
Exactly. So with that said, when I have a band in, it's so funny when cats like walk into the studio for the first time and they haven't been there before, and they're looking around like, okay, so where do I set up? Like, yeah, just get comfortable, plug in, and let's roll. And most times, a band will show up and say, oh, well, we need a couple hours to get sounds. I'm like, yeah, sure, cool. And we're recording within a half hour.
Oh, that's great.
And the thing is, I'll solo things like, oh, solo the guitar. It's like, wait, I hear a little bit of the drums, but not really. I don't hear, and you're basically right on top of the drums. But with that said, I've spent a lot of time choosing the right microphones for I don't have, like, in that room most of the time, I wouldn't have a bunch of omnis going in that space. Now, I've done big band recordings where I'm using all omnis, but it worked for that space. But I just know that, it's like I use a lot of dynamics and some ribbons, in ways that the bleed is pleasant and minimal, and what bleed is there is musical.
That's so cool. So, have you noticed, when you're doing this overdubbing system with the speakers playing into the room, and then you listen back to the stuff and it's all glued together, I guess as you mute some of the other instruments, of course, it changes what you're hearing. But do you also notice the drum character like evolving with each extra little bit of bleed added?
I guess a little bit, but to be honest, Lidge, I don't use the solo button that often.
Use the more button.
Yeah, I mean, of course I do. I use the solo button to check things, but especially when I'm mixing, I really kind of stay away from it. I just like hearing and feeling the entire thing. I feel like I make better decisions. I've learned over the years, I make better decisions in terms of mixing by not using the solo button.
Yeah, well, then if you're getting your sounds to add up into a cool whole at the recording stage, then you don't really need to solo things because you're just trying to listen to the whole. How often do you feel like you're at the mix stage of stuff and you're really changing sounds versus just simply balancing and tweaking a little bit and kind of polishing?
When I'm out at the mix stage, I'm not really changing sounds at all. I mean, honestly, like I'm mixing for me starts when I hit record.
Yeah.
If it doesn't sound the way I want it to sound, I hear it in my head before anything. And if the snare drum doesn't sound, if that's not the right snare drum, well, then I change it. I change the heads or whatever, or the guitar, the amp, the pedals, whatever it may be. Because mixing for me is, it's exactly that. It's usually just some balancing and I feel like if I'm really changing sounds drastically, like with EQ, like I used to, I don't do that anymore, then I just didn't do my job during tracking.
Right. So sometimes I think it's a folly that we think we're going to record stuff and then we're going to figure out how to get it to sound right afterwards.
Well, exactly, man. You know, it's funny. I'm sure I know you've heard this a million times, or at least 100 times. Like, oh, I want that bottom sound. Okay, well, you're playing like a brand new whatever drum kit and blah blah blah, and then by the end of it, I'm kind of like, well, you might have to. That's not the vibe. Like you can't change it in the mix. Well, I get this a lot of times. I used to get a lot of times if people would send me stuff because there's nothing I can really do about that at that point. Mm-hmm. Someone else tracked it, but it's like, yeah, we want a bottom sound. And you're like, oh, dude, well, you're playing like a brand new whatever drum kit and you have like, you literally, like I've gotten stuff where it's like you have like 14 mics on the drum,
right?
Like, like. And you're not playing, and the song on top, even beyond all that, the song it's not even a rock song.
Right.
Right. You know what I'm saying, man? I don't know. It's just all these little pieces that people, feel like they haven't put together in either the writing stage, the production stage, the tracking stage. So then you're like expecting the mix engineer to do some magic. Like put a magic bottom plug-in on it. It's like, doesn't work.
Wait,
that
is
way.
there one?
Actually, man, I gotta go. I gotta get to work on some stuff.
I think sometimes we mistake these references, musical and sonic, that can be inspirations for us, which is totally fine. Like it's totally cool to have a Bonham inspiration as to inspire you to just kind of push forward with what you're doing. But it's a confusion to think that, oh, we're going to just make this, we're going to somehow turn this into that is inspiring us. There was a record years ago, one of the first ones I did, and the band was asking for an intro and they were playing me a 9 Inch Nails intro. And we had this song we were working on. They were like that, like that. And I was like, so finally I was, of course I'm the producer engineer who's there going like, awesome, let's do it. I will jump off a cliff to try and make this happen right now, Right. But finally I was like, well, screw it. I'm just going to rip the intro off that song and paste it on the beginning of our song. And let's see what that looks like. Just as an experiment. Mm-hmm. It sounded terrible and it didn't work. And all the impact of the original production was completely lost as it went from that intro into our song. And like, none of it made sense. And for me at that time, It was this like aha light bulb moment that went off. It's the same thing you just described. You just can't simply cut and paste. I mean, you can if we're talking about sample productions and a whole different kind of vibe.
Right.
But A doesn't equal B, but it's okay for A to inspire B.
Exactly. Yeah, without a doubt, man. I hear you. All
right, so let me ask you about what you're recording with. You mentioned the console over there. Are you using analog? Are you recording with Pro Tools? Are you in the box? What kind of tools do you use to record?
All right. Well, now, again, I totally kind of flipped things up, and I got rid of this Amec console I had for a little while. And I'm actually rocking a Presonus 32.4 AI.
Right on, man.
Yeah. And so with that said, I have really the heart and soul of my studio, is or in terms of the sound, is this thing called Zulu by Handsome Audio. And what it is, I have 8 channels of it, and it's the world's first passive analog tape simulator.
Dig it.
And it is incredible. So this genius cat friend of mine, Langston Massengale, invented it, and I really can't even go in depth in describing it. It would take like probably the entire interview, but I would highly suggest people just go to handsomeaudio.com and check it out. But it's just a wonderful device. Basically, it's a tape machine without tape, and it's passive though. Like I said,
does it look like a tape machine?
No, it has like these really cool control. It's a big like desktop kind of thing, and it's a dual mono device, so 2 channels per device, and I have 4 of them, so I have 8 channels. So mostly, like I send. Actually, I'm using one right now. For my vocal, but
cool.
Drums, bass, vocal definitely get hit with it or run through it, and I track with it. So that's one side of it. And I used to have, a long time ago, I had a Yamaha 1516, which is kind of like the, post P8 PM1000 vibe. It's like around the PM2000 kind of thing. Just like, you could read all these
your console
descriptions for a long time. And then I got kind of tired of that sound. So I got rid of it. And then I got this Amec, which was like massive and just ran super hot. And I got tired of that sound. And I said, you know what, man, my whole vibe is I don't want to see any gear, honestly. It's kind of fun. I'm going like the opposite. I used to have racks, that were taller than me, full of outboard and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just going the opposite direction. I'm mixing the box. And so anyway, the Presonus, the 32A42AI, whatever it is, it's the previous version. Mm-hmm. They have a newer version now. I know you're familiar with it because I think you used it. I saw maybe a Bonnaroo or something like that. I used
the Studio Live 32 mixing console.
Exactly.
Bonnaroo.
Right, the newer one, exactly. So the reason why I was looking at that, and I got the one prior to it, because it has inserts. So, yeah, and but it's not a motorized control surface. It's like old school, it's old school. It's a good.
I love it when we're talking about new digital tech as old school, right?
Yeah, exactly. But so it's acts almost like an old school board where you have to push faders like for when things are coming back after on playback, and it sounds good. And I have, like I said, I have some outboard stuff that I use, but that's pretty much it, man.
Right, it's super cool, man.
Simple.
Well, we'll dig some more into that in just a minute. And then what DAW do you like to record into if you're recording in the box?
Oh, yeah. Sorry. I'm actually a Studio One.
Oh, cool, man.
User.
Awesome. Well,
and again, I love Studio One because for a while you can track with plugins, not just as for listening purposes, but literally like you can put plugins on your inputs and kind of like you would with not Apogee. Where are the other cats?
Oh, UAD and stuff like that.
UAD, yeah. Exactly. So like basically whatever plugin you put on, obviously like I look for stuff that like zero or very close to zero latency, but it'll track. And actually I do that. That's another part of my workflow. So yeah.
All right, cool. Well, let's take a break for a minute and we'll come back in for the jam session. We're going to dig deeper into questions about what mics you're using on different things, talk about working with headphones and not headphones, talk about your workflow. Rockstars, before we take a break, remember you can find links to what we're talking about in the show notes. Just click through on your mobile device or go to rsrockstars.com and find the blog post here with Alan Evans. And then, of course, I've put together a YouTube playlist so you can just click through right there and listen to a bunch of these amazing records that Alan's doing. And we'll see you guys in just a minute for the jam session. This show is sponsored by Recording Studio Rockstars Academy. Are you ready to take your recording, mixing, and mastering to the next level and make your best record ever? Then visit the Academy to find the course that's right for you. Want to record killer drums in your home studio? Then check out Rockstars of Drums to learn how to record, edit, and mix pro-sounding drums with a professional Nashville session drummer in a Grammy-winning studio. Or if you are ready to start mastering your own records at home, then check out Rockstars of Mastering, where I walk you through exactly how I mastered my own record, Skadoosh, using nothing but plugins in Presonus Studio One. These techniques would work for you in whichever DAW you are using right now. And if mixing is your focus, then check out my free course, Mix Master Bundle, where I show you how to mix using stock and free plugins in Pro Tools. Plus, you get a look at how I recorded everything in my studio and multi-track downloads to mix in your own studio, and even include in your mixing portfolio if you want. Are you ready to make your best record ever? Then go to mixmasterbundle.com to get started for free now, and look for the clickable link in the show notes of this episode. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Other World Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your existing Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD drive, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. Hey Rockstars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Alan Evans, joining us from Iron Wax Studios in Deerfield, Massachusetts. Alan, are you ready to jam?
Let's jam.
Dude, I bet you're always ready to jam.
I'm without a doubt.
Did you play music this morning before this interview?
You know, I didn't. I listened to some music, but I didn't pick up the guitar this morning. So no, not yet.
I think you told me that you have kids. You got a couple of kids.
Yes,
talk
indeed.
a little bit for just a moment about the balance of family life and making records. And, you know, for me, I know my world is like get up, get school ready, you know, take my daughter, drop her off at school, turn around, double back, hit the studio by 10 a.m. Are you also sort of putting all those pieces together?
Yeah, that sounds about right, man. I mean, yeah, studio starts at 10 a.m. Pretty much when I have bands come in or if I go in by myself. Our kids are 14 and 18, so
a little more self-sufficient now.
Yeah, exactly. So they just kind of do their thing and do my thing, and it works.
Are they
well.
playing music as well?
Actually, yeah. I mean, they're athletes, kind of like I was when I was growing up. But yeah, our son plays drums and guitar. He has keys. He's been like messing around with like making beats with his boys and stuff like that. Yeah. And then our daughter, she was playing flute for a while. Actually started off with viola and then flute, but then she kind of chilled out on all that. So
all right, cool.
They're on the really good music, so it's pretty awesome.
My daughter is a real music lover. She just sings and sings and sings and she's trying out for the musicals and stuff.
Nice.
It's fun. I feel like I saw a lot of people that are really talented as I came up. As I went to recording studio and chose a path of music, I was, black sheep of the family in a way, whereas like I was doing this direction that nobody in my family could give me any influence about. And I would meet people that were incredibly talented. And sometimes when I looked a little closer, I'd discover that, maybe their dad was in the studio growing up, or maybe they, had some great musical influences in their family. So I always like to think that, maybe my ultimate hit record comes a generation later if my daughter ever picks up the torch of music and makes records herself.
There you go, man. Yeah, I love it. That's great.
All right, cool. So let's talk about your studio some more. I mean, you talked about tracking with a full band in the studio, and getting this great sound and choosing the right mics. Let's dig into that. Drums and the way you record drums is one of the things that really is exciting sounding and unique and cool. And it makes me go, how the hell do I make drums sound that cool? So, Alan, how the hell do you make drums sound that cool?
Oh man, I have some really nice drums, which helps. Yeah. And then I'm lucky enough to work with some really great drummers who come through the studio, so that definitely helps. And I've on my own stuff, I've been playing a couple of years, so I kind of know I can get around. But so it's, to me, it's kind of like most times it's like a less is more kind of thing. Kick drum, it's like one mic. Most of the times I use like a EV666, like from the late 50s. But recently I kind of changed that out to like a telephone, one of the new Telefunkins. But I really love the 666. Just has the sound. Snare top, it's like 50. Oh, lately I've been doing a Beta 56A because I wanted a little brighter sound. But usually it's just a 57. And then like I have like a stereo ribbon overhead, and the overhead actually changes a lot depending on if I want a mono vibe or a stereo. But lately I've been using like this Cascade stereo ribbon mic.
That's cool to hear. That's encouraging too, because that's I'd say a Telefunken's the only thing that makes me go, ooh, that might be expensive. But everything else, I think, that's a very affordable mic collection.
Yeah, I mean, well, the funny thing is the 666, I was after one for years, and they were like, man, you can't find those for under like $400 or $500, which, isn't bad, I guess. I don't know. But one day I was like searching Craigslist, and this cat put up EV666 for $50. I'm not sure if it works because he didn't have the right cable. I was like, okay, yeah, well, it's those old EV mics. Man, you could toss them off at like a 10-story building and they're gonna work, So I knew it was gonna be. It was like whatever, $50. I picked it up, had the right mic cable connector, and bam, it was working. But yeah, I mean, to be honest, man, like so then on the tom, sometimes I've been digging miking the toms, and I just have a couple of MXL 2001s. Which
I got a pair of those. They were the first ones to come out, right?
Exactly. And the reason why I dig those, I had this session one time. It was like some cats came into the studio because they were putting some guitars on a Miranda Lambert tune. Mm-hmm. And I was like checking out the drums. I'm like, wow, man, these drums sound great. He's like, oh yeah, well, the toms specifically. He's like, oh yeah, well, they used some U87s on the toms. I was like, oh, really interesting. So that's why I was like, well, I don't have any U87s, so I have these 2001s, and it sounded, I don't know, it sounded cool, it sounded great. I mean, so there's like nice focus of the toms, but you get like this nice bleed from the cymbals. That's just, again, it's musical. Yeah. And I just use them, I bring them in or out depending on the production on the song.
That's a thing. That's an important point to make, that tom mics surprisingly has a lot to do with the cymbals.
Exactly. Without a doubt. But again, like my whole vibe, man, is how are the mics working? Are they all working together to create the sound? Oh, and then the other thing. So this is the other vibe. I have this one mic that basically sits. It's picking up the kick drum and snare drum. So it's like, I have it over the kick drum, and it's pointing, the diaphragm is pointing at the side of the snare. And it's like we're hanging right above the kick drum.
Above the beater.
Yeah, exactly. Or maybe a little off to the side, like off to the first lug. That would, if you're looking at the kick drum, off to the right.
Toward this.
So it's not right
away from the snare.
Towards. Yeah, exactly. And so honestly, I use that mic. One of the albums I may have sent you was like the newest Soulive album, and that was the only mic that I used on the drums. Like one microphone.
I'm excited to talk about that because that's that.
Cool.
Mono, very focused sound. Like it's because there's not a bunch of mics. It's like super phase coherent, super clear image of just one cool sound. And I've been calling that like the Dap King sound,
exactly.
For lack of a better word, exactly. Because a buddy of mine down here kind of hit me to that years ago, and then I started experimenting with it and loved that sound. What mic do you like to use for that, and how should the Rockstars consider even treating a one mic thing like that?
Man, for that particular recording, I used the mic that I'm speaking into right now. It's a JJ Audio U77. But right now for a while I've been using it's a Sterling Audio ST55.
Okay, cool.
Which is, again, when that thing came out, it was probably like, $100 or something. Like, it's, I think it was like a Groove Tubes had the same version of it. It was like the GT55, and it's like one pattern. It's just cardioid, and I just stick it there, and you just move it around until you get the right balance of kick drum and snare drum. And then, so for if you're going to use, like I use that for just the recording, I definitely sat on it with I think it was compressed or whatever, just to pull in a little bit more of but I mean, you just move it around until you get a nice picture of what does it sound good? Cool. Well, it's good.
Well, I think of that Soulive record as having a crunchiness to it too. And like almost like, harmonic, a nice, a subtle mid-range kind of present harmonic distortion to the whole thing. Is that something that is part of that recording stage of the one mic on the drums, or is that more to do with the way the whole mix kind of glues together later? Any thoughts on that or advice?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, a lot of that sound is the Zulu, the Handsome Audio Zulu that I use. So the Zulu is interesting. And like I said, cats can go research it, but essentially you have three different tape decks to choose from, or vibes. So you can go from like your Swiss, your Studer, and then it has a particular tape formulation with it. So it'd be 456. Then you can choose what's called a Pro-Fi, or Japanese kind of vibe with 456. So that would be like your Tascam or even your Otari 8-track. And then you can go down to your Lo-Fi, which is kind of like your Tascam, like 4-track kind of cassette vibe. Porta-Studio, exactly. And then you have all like these different controls, like bias, enhance, all the and different calibrations. There's a lot to it, man. But essentially, so with that, I just went lo-fi on it. And if you you can smack Zulu with so much signal, it's insane. So, and it reacts and sounds like tape.
That's cool.
So the harder you hit it, and if you have it on like your low studio or low machine setting, lo-fi setting, it's gonna crunch up just kind of like again, like a Porta-Studio, or even like a lot of cats are using like 388s these days. And it'll just, you drive it and it gets that crunch. And after that, honestly, like mixing that Soulive thing probably took me, I probably spent 20 minutes a song.
That's awesome.
Like,
because it already sounds cool.
Because the sound was there. exactly. The sound was there. It's just like, okay, bring that up, bring that down. Okay, cool. Sounds good.
That's
all the effects, like there's like crazy stuff on the organ and we just like, cause with my organ, you can plug it in all in line. So delays or whatever. So it's what's there is
right.
There.
So you tracked with those things. What is your organ?
It's a 1961 Hammond A101. So I'm sure it's a B3, just in a different case. But there's something special about it. The cool thing about it has 1/4-inch outputs on it, and my Leslie has a 1/4-inch inputs on it. So that's why you can put any guitar pedal you want in line. Yeah. And so the Leslie cabinet is literally just a cabinet. And then I have an Ampeg guitar amp driving it. So it's kind of like the John Lord
Interesting.
vibe.
So my Leslie has a built-in, like a tube amp, and you have to use the multi-pin connector to go from the the Leslie pedal at the organ, which has a 1/4-inch in, over to the Leslie. So is yours is set up differently?
Yeah, exactly. There was no multi-pin on mine when I got the organ, and I was in. They're not hard to retrofit, to put on. But my buddy Jamie Simpson, who he works on he builds amps, and he works on like John Medeski's organs and my brother's. And anyway, I told him the situation. He's like, "Oh, dude, I got this cabinet for you. It'll be perfect." So the other thing about the sound of the organ, it is a 15-watt speaker cabinet.
Right. So it's with little.
Exactly. It has a 12-inch woofer in the bottom, and then obviously like the top rotor. But the thing is, I wanted, or people are familiar with organs, they sound great. I mean, if you get a B3 or A100 or C3 with a 122 or 147, it is just an amazing sound. Yeah. It's going to tear your head off, because
huge.
Yeah, exactly. And if you want to get that really driven, that beautiful,
the Deep Purple
Hammond organ sound, dude, it is so loud. So in my studio, like that would not work. So I have like this cabinet that literally has a 15-watt speakers in it, and then a 15-watt Ampeg. So I can really drive that thing, and it's not gonna, like, the drum mics aren't picking it up.
That's awesome, man. So, well, that answers the question I had written down. What's the trick for a great organ sound? But let me jump to the next one. How do you like to record your bass guitar so that you get just the right bass? And then how do you know when the bass is right? I mean, you've got these records that are groove oriented. I want to crank them up. I probably am going to feel like there's a lot of bass on this record, but I don't think that you're like overloading it with too much bass either, So what do we need to know about getting awesome bass?
Wow, man. Okay, so for me, so I have like one of these red DI tube bass DI, or I got there's just a really cool tube DI.
And when you look at it, it just looks like it just says ready with REDDI.
Exactly. And I've used other DIs over the years, but I saw one come up, and I just had to grab it. It was like someone was like a fire sale or something like that. Someone closing up a studio, so I just picked it up. And then I have a bass amp, a couple of heads, and like this 15-inch cabinet. And like the one, it's like a Univox. It's kind of like a cross between. It could be used as a guitar amp, a PA, or a bass head. And it has like this bassman, like a 60s bassman sound. And then below that, I have another head. It's made by this company, EMC, which is like a 70s. It's like a solid state bass amp that was, I think they were like from Kentucky or something like that, like in the 70s. And they're both just really cool sounding amps. So I have a mic on the cabinet, and then I just track DI. And depending on the vibe, sometimes I'll just use the DI. Sometimes I'll use a combination. But if I use a combination in the mix, it all gets bussed to one, down to one, I guess. And then I'll like usually my thing is I'll just throw like a DBX 160 on it and just like till it sounds good. To be honest, man, I don't EQ, like when it comes on the mix, actually even most times in the tracking, I literally don't do anything. That's like bass. I don't do anything to it.
Just get it right in the beginning and there's your bass reference. Yeah. There's the bottom of your whole record.
Exactly. I that's the one thing I really don't mess with in the mix. It's just, if it sounds, I don't know, I just feel like, I guess depending on the tune or the vibe of how much, I think of it this way. It's like, who is, it's like a pyramid. And now who is at the bottom? What's the, technically the base or the foundation? To me, it's like, I think on this tune, it's kick drum or it's bass guitar or, whatever. But somebody, I don't like them fighting. One of them is going to be on top of the other. And that's it. So if it's a tune, usually maybe if it's like a slower tempo tune, I want more kick drum. Okay, well then I'm gonna high pass the bass a little bit, or like during tracking, just bring the tone down a little bit.
Now, what about the one mic on drums when you're using that? I think you said the JJ Audio U67 or the Sterling. Is that my gut is telling me that that's a kick sound that doesn't have a ton of subs to it, right? Or am I thinking about this wrong?
The funny thing is it can, but you can get a lot of low end out of it. But again, you have to move the mic around. Now, the thing is, if you want more low end out of that microphone, well, something is going to suffer. Like you're going to lose snare definition or pop. So again, with the one mic technique, it's all about just moving it around until you get the right sound. And sometimes it's I've done things with drums where there's one mic maybe like 10 feet back, and it's just that is just the sound. And then sometimes it's like right inside the drums, and that's the sound. But it's really just moving around and finding the right sound. And then beyond that, the drummer like dynamics, how you play. If you have a really well balanced drummer who playing very well balanced, it's going to work a lot easier. It's going to sound better, I guess.
Well, so I'm going to describe something that can suck a little bit. You do something, you go to another room, you play it back, it doesn't sound right. You're like, oh, maybe I'll do this. And then you go out and you change something, and then you do it, and then you go to the other room and listen, play it back, and it doesn't sound right. Is there something about your process where you're able to feel like you're making changes in real time? I mean, how do you find the position for this one mic and do stuff? Is it just one step at a time until you kind of hit it and then you're ready to rock? Or is it something that you can hear when it's happening somehow?
Well, a lot of times it's something like I can hear while it's happening. I mean, with me, I'll have headphones on. And sometimes the drums are kind of cranked in the headphones. And just when I'm checking, I like to just hear, like, again, like a half inch, moving the mic a half inch in any direction can be a massive change, in that situation. So yeah, I know what I want to hear. I can hear it in my head. And it's just a matter of, it usually doesn't take me long, luckily.
Do you feel like you have an advantage just because you've been recording for so long? You have these images of sound in your head. Do you feel like somebody who's getting comfortable in their home studio, one room environment, just needs to just simply record a bazillion different, I mean, it's the Bruce Lee quote, right? You just need to apply it.
It is. Yeah, you need to apply it. But man, to be honest, like, again, I go back to, saying, okay, I was mentioning that the other day I went into to the studio and I broadcasted like live on Instagram, right?
Yeah.
So the reason I did that is, a lot of people hear my recordings, like, oh man, it's amazing. And you play all these instruments and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's true. But at the same time, there's a lot of times that I'm just sucking. And, you know, like I go in the studio and things just don't sound right. I may go in the studio one day and come out with nothing. Now, the thing is, like these days, you can go online and this was where my thinking was. You go online and you can see all these 1-minute videos of people just super killing anything, like a dope drummer on whatever. But what you don't see, and a lot of people can get frustrated or discouraged because of that. It's like, oh man, that dude's killing. I'm never going to be that killing. Well, yeah, you didn't see the 12 hours that they put into making that video, or the 12 years that they put into practicing or playing to get to that point, to get to that 1-minute video. Yeah. So that's why I went on and I went live, and people, honestly, the response to it was overwhelming. It was crazy because people were hitting me up like, dude, like it was amazing. Like I forgot the camera was on and I was just doing my thing. I was like, it took me take after take of, I was writing it as I was going. And so I guess what it comes down to is it's just like, it's the experience, you know, like you just have to like keep at it. And I started recording in the late 80s. And I'm still, there's still a lot of holes in my knowledge or whatever, but I've been doing it a long time. So maybe it's a little bit easier for me than some other people.
That's great.
But it's just, it takes time, man. I mean, I guess that's the thing, man. We can go online and find all these tips and tricks and all this kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, man, it's just experience. It's just like Malcolm Gladwell.
Yep.
You know, put your 10,000 hours in, man. You know, it's like that's the secret sauce right there. You know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And you know, it's that expression: every overnight success is 10 years of really hard work.
Exactly.
So let's talk about electric guitar. Another thing you're getting great sounds of. You know, obviously there's lots of different ways we can approach recording an electric. What's a way that tends to work for you? If a band was to walk in and you say everything's already mic'd up, what would that look like right now?
Well, I have some really cool amps. I have the one amp that actually gets used probably 98% of the time is I have a Supro Tremolo Verb. So it's low wattage amp. And it just sounds amazing. And I have one microphone on it. It's a AKG D1000E. So essentially, it's like a 57 kind of vibe, you know, but it sounds a little different, and it just works for that amp. And then next to that, I have like this early 80s Fender Twin 2, which was built by Paul. It's like a hand kind of wired vibe. That Paul Rivera of Rivera Amps, when he was at Fender, he made all these versions of their amps, like the Twin and the, I don't know if he did a Princeton, I don't remember, but anyway, it's just a fabulous amp. I have like some other weird, like Gibson, solid state amps, you know, AC30 and Fox AC30 and stuff like that. But, again, it's just, I have one microphone on each amp. And
just ready to go.
That's ready to go. Yeah.
Oh, shit.
Yeah. And people just come in and sometimes people bring in their own amps, and I'll just like, cool, swap one of my amps
Did you bring a mic? Because I'm not touching one of mine.
Exactly. Oh man, I'll just stick a mic on it and just go for it. To me, man, it's just again, over the years, I've done the whole 2 mics on amps or 2 mics on the amp and then one in the room and all this kind of stuff. And for me, and this is just me, everybody's different, but I just want to get to creating.
Yeah.
I don't, and that's it. Like, I don't want to, I'm just like, drums are like hard enough to make sure that things are like phase coherent, all this kind of stuff. Yeah, exactly. Like, man, I don't want to worry about like moving the ribbon mic in the condenser or the dynamic like back and forth till it sounds right. It's like, man, I just want to stick one mic. It's to sound good, cool. I want to play. Like, that's just my focus, you know. Yeah. And I know that like for instance, the AKG that D1000E or whatever it is, and the Supro, just, it sounds like the Supro. It just, so whatever you plug in, like, you get your sound, and when I hit playback, that's sound. It sounds great. And you just move on, and you make your adjustments. For me, I make my adjustments on the guitar or at the amp. Because I just wanted to, when I hit playback, I just want to hear the way it's going to sound.
That's cool.
Simple.
I like that approach, and I agree with you. I love just getting down to music as fast as possible. I'm still living in multiple worlds because, I treat my studio like a blank slate. When a band comes in, I set up from scratch, and it works, but boy, is it a pain in the ass to have to do that every time. And I'm trying to keep my upstairs loft area. I keep trying to set it up like you just described, where it's like simple miking and it's ready to rock without having to, or ready to groove or ready to jam without having to set up a bunch of stuff. And it's so much fun when you can just go turn on the switches and start making music,
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So another record of yours, or one of the ones in our YouTube playlist, Crowd Company's Stone and Sky. Notice it's got percussion on it and horns on it. And I wondered if you want to comment about things you've learned about recording great percussion and how to get horns right.
Okay. Percussion, I have percussion. I really love utilizing the sound of the room. I'll kind of close mic a few things, maybe congas, but usually, and again, this depends on the situation. With that album in particular, we tracked the percussion afterwards, so it was an overdub. So in that situation, you have a lot more options available to you in terms of using the room. So I have a couple of mics that it's like this one mic I use for percussion all the time. It's like this old, realistic, like a Radio Shack, like this Omni microphone. So it kind of looks like one of those broadcast mics from like the 70s that cats would use on television.
The Bob Barker mic.
Yeah, it's a little larger than that, but that's the vibe. Yeah, and man, it has like this mid-range thing, and again, it's like this weird. It's like an Omni, or at least it says on the label it's an Omni, but it's definitely not. There's some funk to it, but percussion, like, man, for years I was battling with hand claps. Like, that was like the worst. People was like, oh man, let's put some hand claps on. I was like, oh shit. Oh, and all of a sudden I got this microphone, and just on a whim, I don't know, and it was like $20 or something online or whatever, and percussion it sounded perfect. I don't know. So again, I let the microphone do a lot of the, it just sounds right. And you throw it in the mix, bam.
Well, one of the things that I know I've struggled with percussion is the times where you have like just a sort of a crisp condenser mic out there. And then it's like, we'll just use that. We'll just use that one for tambourine and hand claps and shakers. And then you hear it and you're like, the top end sounds terrible like that.
Well, exactly. Well, see, that's the thing. That's what I love about this mic. It has like this mid-range thing. Again, if you just mic up some percussion with like a really nice condenser or whatever, and listen to it by itself, it sounds great. It's like, whoa, that's, it's crispy and blah, blah, blah. And as soon as you put it in the mix, you're like, it's like scooped out, like it disappears. Yeah. And then the more you're like, oh, I don't hear like the congas, I don't hear the cowbells, and you push it up till the point you can hear it, and then all of a sudden it's way too much.
And it sounds.
And then you bring it back, and then it's gone.
Sounds glassy or edgy.
Exactly. So this microphone, man, it just like you can push it up, and it just sits just perfectly. Now, when you solo it, it's not the greatest sounding thing. Like, you're like, really? That's it has like this honky mid-range kind of thing or something. But man, in the mix though, it's just perfect. It just gets you jumping.
Nice, man. What about your experiences with working with drummers who then go put percussion on their own records. Have you ever run into the battle where everybody just assumes that the drummer should play the percussion on the part, and then you discover that they really don't know how to play percussion?
Exactly. Well, that's the thing, man. Like, yeah, it's a friend of this cats who were just in the studio. They're coming back in. We just finished a single, and they're coming back in, and they say, "Hey, man, we have this tune, and you have this Soulive tune that has this percussion track, and we want it just like that." And I was like, "Okay, well, it sounds great, but I didn't play percussion on that. That was my boy Danny Sedownik, who has played with everybody. Like, he's like a huge, big time dude. That's his bag, you know what I mean? So it's kind of funny. Like, anybody, like, yeah, you get bands, it's like, oh, let's put a tambourine track on or whatever. And it sounds cool until you get a real percussionist in there. Woo, it's lights out. It's a completely different bag. And yeah, so percussion, man, I try to leave that to the big boys, to the professionals, cats who like, yeah, I mean, I put tambourine on whatever and percussion on my own tracks. I played congas a little bit, but I stopped playing congas because I was in these situations where the cats are like, "Oh man, play congas on live at least, you know."
Yeah, beat up
play
your
congas,
hands
and then the next tune I'm playing guitar, dude. Like, literally, my left hand, my fingers would double in size, and then I got a Strat in my hand, like trying to play. It's ridiculous. So I said, "Nah, no more of that for me."
I'm trying to remember. I haven't said his name in a minute, but the drummer and the tambourine player for the Motown band.
Oh,
it was so good. And he plays the tambourine with a skin on it. And if you see it in the Motown documentary, you know, he plays on the old recordings, but also in like when the band gets up there. And I just remember being struck by that and being like, that's how you play that thing. You can't just be anybody and just grab it and go. It takes a real skill set to play tambourine with just the right feel.
Exactly. I mean, like I said, man, I know that most of us, and even myself included, can't always like afford to or have the time to get a percussionist in on a track. But boy, when you do, it just elevates the entire track, because there's just a musicality that, like, a really good percussionist has. It's just so hard to match. You know, just like going out in the room and having like you said, like, oh, the drummer plays drums, so he can. The other thing is, a lot of times when the drummer plays percussion, I feel like they're playing almost the same thing as they would play on drums. So it disappears in the mix. Because they're like, you know, I played 16ths on the hi-hat, so they're playing 16ths on the tambourine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just a you know,
I've seen
thing.
the drummer or somebody go out there to do a tambourine, and they, in their head, they hear the tambourine as this big expressive instrument. So they do big body movements, and it just makes the whole thing late and totally out of pocket, you know? And I've learned that tambourine, you know, if you get close on the mic and gain it up, and then you just, you know, you move your wrist just so you can get a much more in pocket thing like that. But
exactly.
Well, let's jump to horns for a minute. What are some ways that you like to mic up the horns when they're playing in your room? What are some things that you've tried before that you learned, like, wow, that doesn't work for horns?
Well, to be honest, like, in terms of horns, you cannot go wrong if you just read how Al Schmidt tracks horns. I mean, to me, that's like that's the golden ticket right there. So for people who don't know, trumpet and this, I should say this does change, but generally, for like the crowd company kind of vibe, I would do a ribbon. I have like this cat in Russia made like these ribbon microphones. So it was just like kind of Royer, 121 clones or whatever. Mm-hmm. So, you know, so I use those on trumpet and trombone, and they're probably, I'd say, about 6 to 8 inches away from the bell of each horn. And then for saxophones, I'll use, I use this U77, which is really awesome because I can switch it between cardioid and omni. So I would put it in omni, and that would be about 8 inches off from the horn, pointing down in between the bell and the body of the saxophone.
So you get a little bit of the overtones coming through the sound holes.
Exactly. It's just, it's just a bigger picture of the instrument. Now, I've done horns then this is the one thing a lot of people, their experience with miking things, most people have seen instruments mic'd on stage.
Right.
At live shows. So you go in the studio and and so, well, that's how they use this microphone on stage. Well, there's a reason why they did it on stage. So I've made the mistake of, shoving like a dynamic mic into the bell of a horn, when I was, younger or whatever. It's just it's not a great sound, but live you're doing that just because there's a million other things that are affecting what's going into that microphone. So you're just trying to get as close as you can on the saxophone or whatever instrument. So that's my vibe. I just try to give the horn some space, some air.
How do they play together? How close do they stand to each other?
Yeah, they're usually kind of right next to each other, just like they would in
on stage,
in a live situation. Yeah. But so with that said, and I know I sent you something earlier that unfortunately everyone's probably not going to be able to hear yet, but this big band album that I don't know if you had a chance to check it out. But anyway, that was a totally different scene where, it's like a funk big band, and I had all the trombones around in a circle around an omni microphone.
Oh, cool.
Then I had all the trumpets standing next to them, all in a circle around an omni. And then I had all the saxophones in a semicircle with, omni, kind of spot mics throughout the section, maybe 4 omnis or whatever. And boy, that is a big sound.
Oh, cool. When does that, are we going to be able to hear that one later?
Yeah, that's, I think that album I've heard is coming out in May.
All right, cool.
So,
cool. Take it.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I'm excited to hear that. And then there's one other unusual recording technique that we should talk about for a minute. And I want to then jump to some of your mixing stuff. But you've been working with the band Eavesdrop. And then you recently did a beautiful one mic session inspired by John Cuniberti. And I wondered if you could tell us about that recording process for you. First, tell us, what was it that you guys did? And then talk about the process of getting that sound.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'll tell everyone that I'm a huge listener of this podcast. So when John was on, driving around back and forth to the studio, and he starts describing the one mic technique. So then after the program, I went on YouTube and checked out his channel, and I immediately was like, Eavesdrop would be perfect for this.
That's great.
Now there are a group of women, 3 women who sing just beautifully together. One of them plays guitar, and then they also have a band, a backing band that they play with, depending on the gig. So anyway, I shot them. I was like, look, check out these videos. I want to do this with you. I just know it's going to work great. So the thing with the one mic thing, and obviously bringing in a videographer to film it. So the thing is, it's all one take, and you have to place everyone around the stereo ribbon mic, so that you get a nice balanced sound. It's literally, you're just moving people around like you would faders. It's just mixing before you hit record or while you hit record or whatever. So they found a space that this big auditorium, and we set up on the floor. And so the one video that you have is just the 3 of them singing, and
beautiful sound, beautiful harmonies and everything.
Exactly. Now, I'll tell you that this was my first attempt at it, and it was challenging, especially with the full band. Now, the room was especially challenging. It was a pretty big boomy room, and it was old and not really treated for music, for audio. So the full band thing sounds really cool, but it definitely has like this like exaggerated pet sounds kind of like, vibe, like just, like the wall of sound kind of thing. It's like big and reverby and but it, like I said, it worked really well for the three of the trio. And again, the full band one came out really cool. It's I probably would have chosen a different room for that, but it's amazing when you get it right. I mean, when on that particular tune that you have up there, I had just goosebumps.
That's great, man. That's
exciting. It's just beautiful.
Well, Rockstars, we have a link to that in the YouTube playlist as well, so you can check that out and go listen to it. And sorry, I cut you off, but continue.
No. I mean, it's just I would highly suggest everyone try it at some point. It's definitely check out John's videos for sure, because the quality is just incredible. And just try it. It's an education for sure. It really is.
What was the mic that you chose for yours?
Well, that was that Cascade. Was it the something 15 or whatever?
Stereo ribbon mic. Cool.
Stereo ribbon mic. Yeah, exactly. And it's a good sounding mic. I know John uses the AEA, which is. I would love to get my hands on that, but
now what about your mic pre? What'd you choose for a mic preamp?
Man, so that's where I fell short, and I'll tell everybody I fell way short on that. I just used I told you I have the Presonus 32 AI console. Well, I have the rack version of that as well. I had prior to that, and I just used the pre's on that. Now, the thing is, with the full band, everything sounded great, and it wasn't until we did the trio where the preamps definitely, you could hear, better preamps would have been better.
Well, what's the stuff? What are the things that you began to notice where you're like, oh, I should have chosen something else? Is it noise floor? Is it something about frequency response?
No, the frequency response is great. It's just the noise floor, the self noise of the preamps themselves. Now with the ribbon mic, I had to crank the preamps on that Presonus like all the way up.
Right.
So at that
did you
point,
consider that like a cloud lifter or something might have helped out in a situation like that, or some something like that?
Yeah, Lidge, after I was done. Yeah, I'm telling you, man. Yeah, so the thing is, I don't know.
That's how you find out.
And that happens. Yeah, it happens, man. Like, that's the thing. Like, this is, you live and learn, you know? And so with that said, I have, actually what I'm using right here, I have a Rane MS1B, which, it's a really awesome preamp and super inexpensive, and people can read up on it. It's really cool. They don't come up very often, but if they do, I'd check them out. But anyway, I had one of those, and now I have two of them, but after the session.
Nice.
So, man, it's live and learn, with that said, man, like I was bugging out on it. I was like, oh man, I wish, and then I sent it around to everyone. They're like, oh man, it sounds great. Now the funny thing is I sent it off to John, and I was like, oh man, I can't believe I'm going to send this joint to him. He's just going to tear me up. And he hit me back with an email. I was like, oh, it sounds beautiful. I was like, okay, cool. I dodged that bullet, But he did have one comment though, which he was like, oh, what did he say? John's like, Well, next time you may want to use the black version of the microphone, or black out the microphone, because that's why I use the AE8, the black, the microphone. You don't see it as much in
it's not about, it's the one mic sessions, but it's not about the one mic. It's about the musicians.
Yeah, exactly. But then I sent it to another friend, my boy Langston, from Handsome Audio. And I told him, he was like, no, actually, I like seeing the microphone. So again, it's personal. Yeah, it's just preference or whatever.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, but I would say again, man, like if you're gonna do something like that with a ribbon microphone, like just try and get use a better mic pre if you can. But again, hey man, it turned out pretty good.
Well, no worries. Whatever. Well, we're running low on time, so let me jump forward and ask you some of the mix questions, because I love hearing that you're using Studio One, and I want to know more about that. You are recording using a bunch of the Studio One, the Presonus gear now in your studio.
Yes.
You're recording into the box using also the Zulu Handsome Audio tape emulator on the way in. But then once you've recorded all this stuff, what does that look like in your process? How are you mixing your records?
Man, it's pretty simple. I don't use a lot of plugins, honestly, when I'm mixing. I pretty much, I don't EQ anything. Very rarely. And if I'm using any kind of EQ, it's just like, maybe it's like a high pass filter on here or there.
Choosing who gets the bottom of the record and all that.
Yeah, exactly. But again, I make a lot of my choices going in. So one of the tools I love using is this thing. It's a plugin that I put on my inputs. It's by Sonymous. It's the their 1073 plugin. It's like Burnley 70.
Oh, cool. So you can use the so with the Presonus setup, you can commit plugins in the recording stage, but you can commit third-party plugins as well.
Exactly. So that one. What I've done with the 73, I don't use the EQ on it, but what I really love on it is you can use the gain state, either the line gain or the mic gain. So what I've done, I've kind of created these different presets. So I use the test tone to calibrate the output so that everything's matched output. So if I bring the gain all the way up to like 60 or whatever it is for on the mic pre of that plugin, then I know that I don't have to mess around with the output. It's just set, so I have these different presets for plus 15, plus 20, plus 30, whatever. Right. So I have those on every channel and with varying degrees of gain. So I know like the drums, they're just set they're just hot, bam. Yeah. Now, not that the drums are super crunchy, but they impart like this really nice tone. And then again, with bass, guitar, varying degrees of gain. So again, once I get to the mix stage, that's just one less thing I have to mess with.
That's cool.
I just have the tone I dig.
I know the 1073s have always been a great choice for rock and roll, for just about everything, I've had the pleasure of recording with the BCM 10 console before. And remember we did some 8-track sessions with just that, and mixing it back, it just sounded so cool, even though it was the simplest thing in the world,
Yeah, exactly. So, like I said, man, the mixing stage is a lot of it for me is just balancing, is placing things in the stereo field and balancing.
And what about things like delays and reverbs? If it's an instrumental record, maybe you're getting those sounds on the way in, but what about, are you using spring reverbs on drums and stuff like that? And how does that come from your plugin world, or do you have a way to incorporate the real deal?
Both. A lot of it these days, to be honest, are in the plugin world. I have like a cool like Space Echo. I think it's called Outer Space. And I use that a lot. I'm definitely a big fan of like echoes and reverbs. I've kind of chilled out on a little bit, although you didn't help, man. I just listened to Homeboy talking about the transatlantic.
Oh yeah, it's so good. So I hope he does a spring reverb next.
Yeah. I'm sure. Yeah.
Brian
So
Charles.
yeah, man. So I need the fellow Massachusetts cat,
Yep. Yeah.
So I need to check that out. That was one of the things I had on my list for today. But I love plate reverbs I'm a big fan, or I have, for a long time, the Valhalla,
Yep.
like vintage verb in the room, the plate. Those are kind of my like go-tos. Yeah.
Very cool. All right. So what about, the way that mixing is done in Studio One? I have not gotten into it as far as, as deep as learning how to do automation or any of those things. Is that part of your process? Is fading in, fading out, easy, challenging? Do you just avoid all that stuff together and just kind of balance the faders and call it done? And you're mixing with a board where you're actually grabbing some faders to do these balances, or is it all clicking with a mouse?
No, man, I do all the mixing on my laptop these days, with no control surface. I have like a couple of controllers, like I have like a big mouse with a big wheel, like a ball on it, which is it's very comfortable.
Nice.
And yeah, I have another little controller that just you can program like, go back to this marker or fast forward or, different functions. Yeah. But yeah, it's mostly, it's just on the laptop. The funny thing is, so for a long time I was mixing on the console. And the funny thing is, and I'm sure you've experienced this, you get a young band and they're all excited to, track and mix on a console and blah, blah, blah. And then you send them away with the mix. And then 2 days later, after explaining to them, like, well, recall it's not instant recall, it's like, oh yeah. And then like 2 days later, like, oh, well, can we have like these background vocals up, blah, blah. And, it's like, yeah, man, we can do it. It's going to take a while because I have to like pull up all my recall sheets and this and that. So that kind of started happening more often. I was like, man, let me check out this in the box thing. And then honestly, after like listening to, Andrew Sheps, talk about mixing in the box and like there's like no excuse and this and that. I was like, you know what? Let me just check this out. Let me just do it. And so I've in the past I tried to mix in the box with Pro Tools and Logic, and I was just I always felt like it was like you're listening to the mix behind glass or something. Just didn't like jump out of the speakers for me. And then I met the cats from Presonus down in New Orleans one time. I was down there playing Jazz Fest, and then I checked out Studio One, and all of a sudden I was like, I mixed something, and I was like, it jumped out of the speakers. I was like, oh, there it is. Now, with that said, maybe that was just experience, catching up or whatever. Like maybe if I had mixed that same song in Pro Tools, I would have had the same experience. I don't know. I don't know if it's the software or if it was just I just got better. Who knows? But I've just been really happy with it.
Yeah, well, I also wouldn't doubt yourself. I mean, you're an individual who has tried a lot of different mics, and when you find one that works, you're like, that's the mic for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, so I just really dig it. It's a good cross between Pro Tools and Logic. Do you
use the project feature? Like, will you mix 5 songs and then throw them into the project and kind of, export them out that way and swap them out as part of your work process or anything?
I have used the project side of it, but generally, like for people just that at the end of the mixing process, when I print some, balance a mix or print a mix, whatever you want to call it, I'll just throw like a ozone, like a max, the maximizer or whatever it is, on it, just to bring the level up so it's, how it is these days, man. You send a mix that's not limited out to somebody and they're like, oh man, it's so low. And
sometimes you send a mix that's not limited out to yourself and you make the same comment, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Exactly.
All right, man. Just so many fun questions I want to ask you. I'm going to ask you one more related to that. And then we'll close out here. But who is Evergroove and why is mastering important?
Ooh, man. Okay, so Evergroove is a really good friend of mine. It's Brad Smalling. He's out in Denver, outside of Denver, in Evergreen, Colorado. And I've known Brad for a long time. He's a fantastic recording engineer. Has a really cool studio out there. It's actually a Russ. What's his name? Russ Lachaud. It's like this studio designer. I'm sorry if I butchered his name, but anyway. Brad. Like many engineers, he has just a great sounding control room. So it was easy for him to transition into mastering. Mm-hmm. And what is mastering? I literally have just had this conversation with a band who sent. They said, "Oh, we know somebody who can master for us," and so they sent this tune to them, and I listened back to it. I was like, "No, that's not it."
Yeah.
So I sent them to another really good friend of mine, who is a mastering engineer, and I described mastering to the leader of the band as this. It's like, people who restore paintings, like I should say this one master came back and it was completely different. It was a different mix. It was EQ'd all crazy and it was louder, but it was also just different. Mm-hmm. And so, think about it, like if you're restoring a painting, like, if you're going in and restore like this Picasso and like, well, if that's green, like someone who's coming in to restore is not going to change that to purple or blue. They're just like restoring it, so it's just like it's crisper, it's brighter, it comes off the canvas. Mm-hmm. And that's the only way analogy I could come up with at the moment in terms of mastering. And then and luckily he understood. It's like you're not trying to change the mix. You're not going to fix it. Again, we always say, "Oh, we're going to fix it in the mix." No, you're not going to fix it in the mix, and you're most certainly not going to fix it in mastering. So it's just gonna bring out what's wrong with it or what's right with it.
Yeah.
So I've been to mastering many times and I've attempted it. It's not my bag, like I know I'm not good at it. I would never master anything I've recorded for sure.
What sort of speakers and monitors do you use? And when you're mixing on your laptop, are you switching over to headphones for that process, or do you mix in the one room control room, or is the laptop jam happening back at the house studio in a different environment?
Yeah, the mixing is on the laptop jam, like in a different environment, usually at home. It's just comfortable.
Yeah.
That's basically it. And it's a 20-minute drive to the studio, so if I don't have to, then hey, why not?
Or unless there's a new podcast episode out.
Exactly. Well, no, you're right about that, dude. No. That's straight up. That's the truth right there. But so at the studio, I have like these event 2020s, like
I know them.
Old school.
I know them. I made many records on those.
Yeah, man, and they're the old school. They're like the passive ones.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just dig them. I just know what music sounds like coming out of them. And then obviously in the studio when I'm tracking with a band, I'm also on headphones while they're recording, just so I can hear what's going to tape, I guess you'd say. But yeah, listening on those. And then at home, I'm just using the Sony whatever.
7506s, the old school Sony
dude,
headphones.
Yo, man. Yeah, straight up.
That's what Andrew Shep's mixes on.
Yeah, that's what exactly I was mixing on after I listened to that podcast.
That's great, man.
I'm telling you, man, straight up. I just heard that. I was like, all right, cool. Let me try it. I just grabbed those headphones and I grabbed the Audio Quest or whatever it is.
The red dragonfly, is that it?
Yeah, the dragonfly thing. And I was like, yeah, this actually works. And,
man.
I don't know. It works, man. No mastering engineer has told me there's like, the funny thing is, I was doing mixes like on the console and all this kind of stuff with the speakers. And then I didn't tell anybody I switched. Nobody. Then next album, I just sent out to mastering. They're like, man, sounds great. And I was waiting for just waiting
for that shoe to drop.
Yeah. Like, oh, dude, like sounds different. Or you, blah, 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 the low end or mid range, whatever. And nobody said anything. I was like, cool. All right.
Yeah, that's great, man. All right. So now here's a question pertaining to that. When you go from control room to laptop, what about your plugins? Is that easy to get the plugins from one place to another? Is that a problem that even needs to be solved?
No, because I'm using the same exact computer.
Okay, dig it. All right, cool.
Yeah, man. So the funny thing is, I for a while I had like the Mac Tower, not the trash can, but I had the last generation of the
that's what I got.
The Mac Pros. Yeah. Exactly. So man, one day I was in the studio with a band, or the band was about to show up. I hadn't been in the studio in a few weeks. I showed up, a couple hours early or an hour early to get ready. Went to go turn on the Mac and nothing. There was nothing. I was like, wait, did it get unplugged or is there something fused out? I don't know what. Dude, the thing was dead. And the band is showing up. I'm like, oh, you gotta be kidding me. Luckily, I had my laptop there, which I never purchased with the intention of using it for tracking. Man, I just went around town, got the right, cables, because of course it's like the new laptop with just the USB-C, ports or whatever. So I had to convert whatever. Been using it ever since, man. Now, the beautiful thing I like about using the laptop in the studio is I can have it set. I built this custom console for the Presonus. And so off to the side, I made a space where I could just have the laptop kind of down. And whereas before I had two big, computer monitors, one on the wall, one on this rack, and all you could see was like the Studio One or Pro Tools going. Now it's like this little laptop's down there, tucked away. You don't see it. And it's just, I don't know, it's pleasing to me. Again, it's just me trying to get rid of the gear.
Yeah, you're just listening.
Just listening, man. Exactly.
Cool. All right, man. Well, I hate to bring this to an end. I do have 2 other interviews to do today alone, and I'm excited about. Man. So, but I want to jump to the next question, which is we're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you're going to go find young Alan, who's I don't know what you're beating drums on when you were 9 months old. No, I guess we can't go back that far because you wouldn't be able to answer the question. But you're going to go back and give yourself advice. And you can say, look, dude, here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day. What would you go back and tell yourself if you could?
All right, man. Well, actually, you know what? I'm going to answer this in 2 parts if you don't mind, because it's all one.
I don't mind.
All right. So one, I'd say don't let the perceived lack of gear, resources, or knowledge prevent you from creating art.
Nice.
And then beyond that, I say this to a lot of people, and I'd say this to myself: be passionately true to yourself and your artistic vision. And with that said, surround yourself with other artists, other people who are equally as passionate. And the most important thing is learn from each other and support one another. Mm-hmm. All the gear and the knowledge and the resources, all that will come, but you have to start going back to the initial quote. Just like get off your ass and just do it. Everything, like, don't worry about, oh, I need this mic or I need this and this and that. Man, there's been people who've done a lot more with a lot less. Mm-hmm. So there's no excuses. Just just do it. Just do it.
Yeah, good advice, man. I need to give myself that advice all the time.
Yeah, I mean, me too, man. That's the truth. But there you go.
Well, man, thank you so much for being on Recording Studio Rockstars with us. I feel like we just scratched the surface, so maybe we'll have to do a round 2 later on. And I can't wait to come out to Deerfield, Mass, and come visit your studio and see what that jam's all about, and hear whatever your next record is, man.
Right on, let's do it, man. I'm always down.
If you come down to Nashville too, come to the Toy Box studio.
I'm in.
I don't have a Zulu Handsome Audio, but I do have a real 16-track tape machine we could try out.
We can do something with that, man. Hey.
All right. Tell the Rockstars how they can find you online and follow you and listen to your jams. I know your Instagram is also well worth hooking up with.
Oh, cool, man. Yeah. So website is ironwax.com. And then on Instagram, you can find me, I guess maybe if you just search Alan Evans or Instagram /PlayOnBrother. All one word.
Dig it. Alan, A-L-A-N Same
indeed.
spelling as my dad's name.
Oh, right on, man. Yeah, I'm one of those Allens.
That's right. All right, dude. Thanks so much for joining us, and I can't wait to meet you in person.
Yeah, same here, brother.
Man, talk soon. Cheers.
All right.
Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, then please share this episode with your friends on social media and leave a rating and review on iTunes to help the podcast reach more rock stars like yourself. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to rsrockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. Also, remember to hit the subscribe button to keep up with these weekly episodes. And if you're ready to make your best record ever, then head over to Recording Studio Rockstars Academy, where you can start with my free mixing course at mixmasterbundle.com. Look for the link in the show notes. And if you want more free content from Recording Studio Rockstars, all you have to do is go to rsrockstars.com/email. Again, that's rsrockstars.com/email to enter your name and email, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, podcast updates, and even free gear giveaways for your studio, all totally free. Thanks for listening, and thanks for being a rock star. I'm Lyd Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.